AutoBlack is a discussion-based podcast hosted by a group of unapologetically black architects, where we get on this virtual stoop and we talk about everything from design to culture to politics and beyond, and we do so through the lens of the built environment. So tap in, join the discussion, and welcome to the stoop.
Question for the group. In the day and age that we live now, where we're inundated with technology and all these different ways to connect and to communicate with people, how do you all do community nowadays? Like, what does that look like? We're all from the year of 1900 and whatever, and it's changed over time. But like now, in your big age that you are now, like, how do you do community? What does that look like?
Not gonna lie, my community is honestly probably my coworkers. I mean, when you saw when we were in Boston, like we hung out with our coworkers a lot. It's a little different here in Baltimore, just because it's a little less community at my current office. But I think that's my biggest community right now since I've moved. It was a little different when I lived in Boston.
And like, how do you meet new people nowadays too? That's
Work,
another caveat.
conferences.
Extracurriculars. Because you have a life outside of work.
No, I don't. Project architect life over here. We live, sleep, and breathe architecture.
Yeah, my community is just my husband and my family that live around the area. I don't want to say work's my community just yet. Yeah, can't say that.
And like again, like you know, how are y'all like actually like meeting new people? And like the reason why I bring this up is because we're in this world and we're inundated with ways to connect and to create an idea of a community, and social media and the internet has drastically changed the way that we communicate and the way that we talk, and it's like it replaced the check-in phone call or let's meet up at the local spot with I'm gonna send you a reel, or I'm gonna comment on your post, or I'm gonna like your video, and like those have become these, in some ways, a fabricated idea of community, and like social media has created this false sense of community. And so the question that this particular topic and episode is going to be about is just really understanding what is this social dilemma and how social spaces have been changed over time, and then particularly as it relates to like the work that we do as architects and urban designers, and people that are in the that work in the built environment. And just really, has the internet actually replaced real community with a convincing fake? Like, I know we always talk about a lot of like we're missing third spaces. We look at Gen Z and we talk about how they don't have places to connect, they don't have places to do community. And there's a question of whether or not, especially for that generation who actually grew up in the age of the internet, where we all come from a world in which we remember that it was a little bit more analog. But what's your perspective on like how we have evolved as a generation? Are we actually like less connected as a generation, despite having all these actual ways to communicate and to touch point and to have access to other people's lives? Like, is it really just a false reality of like true community?
Well, I think a lot of that has shifted since the pandemic. For example, and maybe it's just again me being older, but pre-pandemic, when I was in Boston, I was out and about. I was joining photography groups. We would go and do photo walks of the city, and so that's how I built my community. But my community was also largely on Instagram, right? It was the people who were liking my photos. It was me liking their photos back. Again, it was these were people that I had met in person, but that online that community that was built in person also extended online. But since the pandemic, I feel like that idea of community has definitely shifted a little bit. And honestly, I'm a little bit more. I guess I wouldn't say more. I've actually taken a step back from social media. I don't post as much. I don't really care to like other people's stuff as much anymore. And so that my community is kind of actually shrunk. I've even started unfollowing people that I used to follow back in the day.
I think it's how we use social media. Um, I don't want to say that it's a false sense of community. I think it's a different type of community because you're not in person, so you're not reacting to like emotions, facial expressions, all of that. So I don't think we should use it as a replacement of such and like remember its place. Um, but I feel like it does create a community in some sense. And I guess I'm a little younger than y'all, so I'm more of a zillennial in this manner. So I would do like the online chat rooms and games when I was in like high school, and talk to people who honestly I don't know who exactly they were on the other side of it, but it helped me learn how to communicate in a sense virtually, which is important, very important now. Um, but I would say when it comes to like the boundary where you have in-person friends but you're engaging with them online, I think you have to put in more active relationship building and not use the social media as like, oh, I sent you a reel, oh, I liked your photo, oh, I did this comment, as a replacement for like an actual like let's hang out, let's see each other, let's go get dinner, let's like have these conversations. I think that's where the problem may lie a little, is that people are using it as a replacement and it should really just be an enhancement of your relationship, not, you know, one or the other.
First of all, Whitney would have been on How to Catch a Predator in her younger days. Talk to randos. But also, I don't think like we're not that far removed from like social media because we had AIM growing up. We had BlackBerry Messenger, and so
I don't
we had these. I'm sorry, what?
I mean, I know what it is, but I never used it.
Extra stage left. Why are you on this podcast? You clearly are not of the same generation.
You know what? Yeah, I was gonna come at you with that age comment, but you never had an aim?
No,
Hotmail, none of those chat rooms.
no,
Oh
Did
wow.
you have your first phone was like a probably like a smartphone, wasn't it?
Wait,
no. It was
wait,
a flip phone. It was an LG flip phone.
do you know what dial-up internet sounds like?
Yes, I do.
Okay, all right.
Oh,
That's okay.
Well, honestly, though, I only feel like I know that because we grew up in like the very rural, like country area. Had we not, I probably wouldn't have known.
So you were the last people to get like high speed internet. You
I
guys
didn't have
had
cable till I was 10. I missed out on what?
okay. So it's just the AOL Messenger that you kind of can't relate on.
No. I had a
Okay.
MySpace.
Okay. So you're still one of us. Okay.
Yeah, I
barely.
had MySpace for like 2 years.
I've never had MySpace, but that's
Uh,
because yeah of other things.
Well, with that though, based off of what you kind of laid out, would you argue that there is a such thing as like a digital third place? Like that's a real thing, and that's a real space and medium in which people like connect.
I would say, and I think this is where we get into communication issues, is kind of giving names to things related to technology as they come about that aren't truly related to like our everyday lives. So I would say it can be some sort of other space, but not necessarily a third space. Because in my definition of a third space, it's not only like a space that's provided, but it's also, and I was talking about this earlier this week, I think it also has to do a lot with like culture and activities. Because, for instance, at the Chinatown Gate Park here in Boston, like it was like 30 or 40 degrees middle of the day, and all of the older Asian folks in the neighborhood were still out in the park sitting down, whether they were gambling, smoking, chit chatting, they were out there, and that's their third space. And all that's out there are tables and chairs. But even then, a lot of them were standing. So it's kind of like the space is there, and some of the items are provided, but really that's a cultural thing. Um, so let's say if we could call it a forced space, maybe, but it's not the same.
Yeah, and actually, to Whitney's point, I think safety and comfort plays a large part in calling a space an actual space. On social media, you can say whatever it is you want, but it's not going to be safe for you if you say something crazy that someone disagrees with, right? So I don't think I think calling the internet or social media a space would be giving it too much justice or giving it too much credit than it actually is. Yeah,
But it kind of is though space though, right? Because you can have it curated to what you want it to be.
It's
Really.
a
sure.
platform. I would say it's a
But any
platform.
right, and anyone could come in and share their thoughts. Like I'm not going to take that away from that part of social media. But I do think even with us, if we're being honest, we are careful in what we say and how we say it because of what it may do to people who may interpret it. It may interpret what we're saying incorrectly, and so I wouldn't consider this platform a third space per se, only because of that caveat of, well, if I say X, Y, Z, and I think you guys know what I'm what I'm trying to communicate here. If we brought up certain conversations,
Mhm.
certain people would be, pitchforking outside of our buildings here. But anyway, that's all I wanted to.
But would something like WhatsApp be considered social media?
Ah,
Because then
I
you
think so.
communicate. You have your own special sort of group. It's like a contact list. Only
yeah,
those people can really see your post on there. You communicate with people that's not only within your immediate area, but also internationally.
yeah.
So in some way, certain apps, I guess, can be. I don't know. You're saying like fourth space, I guess, but have that same sort of community aspect that you probably wouldn't get if you didn't have them.
Yeah, that's a good
Hmm.
point.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Like
I think
maybe it's not a space, but it is a community. Like I think
Mm.
it could be
Yeah,
a community.
I would argue that it's a fabricated false sense of community. Like obviously the social media giants tell us it's a community. But at the end of the day, they're manipulating it and the algorithm is forcing you into an echo chamber that's going to keep you addicted, that's going to keep you scrolling, that's going to reinforce biases that you may already have. And I think what the difference between an actual physical space that you go to, and we're all in the industry of shaping the built environment, and so there's a certain social political arena that goes on when you're actually in real community with people, and you're having to sort of navigate these boundaries and understand the social cues, the nuance, the nonverbal communication aspects of it. Whereas when you're in a virtual space, one, it's highly, highly, highly curated to reinforce what you already believe. And then I think that it takes away a lot of those nonverbal sort of communication aspects that really force you to go deeper, ask the deeper questions. And it reminds me of this book by Richard Sennett. It's called The Uses of Disorder, and he was talking about how the, homogenous communities that are a similar social class, similar socioeconomic status, similar ethnicity, they have this false sense that they're actually in a real community because you walk outside, you see your neighbor looks like me, or your neighbor looks like you, your neighbor has the same type of job or education background that you do, so you have this idea that I know my neighbor because I have shared experiences. Whereas in a heterogeneous community where it's mixed income, different economic education backgrounds, you're actually forced to have conversations with that neighbor because you don't actually know that neighbor. And so that cultural exchange, that asking the deeper question, that's actually a more real sense of community than one that is highly curated and homogenous. And I think that's like the danger of like calling social media, digital spaces, like community.
But I can argue against that though, because just being an architect or growing up in New York City don't isn't like a push towards sort of blending income levels within apartment buildings. So like you already kind of curate, or you're already pigeonholed into certain economic groups just as, based off of life. Like, you know, I grew up in New York, and most of the people around me were black, and most of the people around me probably voted the same way and had similar, or if not very, very similar ideas of, life and, I don't know, politics and stuff like that. So uh, to have that also online, I don't see, there may not be that big of a difference between, I mean, understandably, the algorithms are curating what you see, but you can also push towards seeing other things. Like, I don't agree with Candace Owens, but I watch her sometimes. Like, so, like, see, things like that.
I
I
think what
think
you're getting at
too.
is,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Whitney.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think too, Rob, your argument disregards the chat features of the social media apps. Like it's very focused on the what's it called? The scrolling, the doom scrolling, and all of that. But there is the chat feature, and I feel like some people may use that more than others. So like I'm in a lot of group chats on Instagram right now, and I haven't read any of those messages, but it has created the opportunity for a lot of my friends to get closer. And now we have group texts on our phone. They're actually all going to some yoga Pilates free thing today. So I think like that argument kind of disregards like the chat features of the apps.
We'll say, Whitney, there's a group chat. It's like black people who don't play spades on Instagram. I
Except
haven't
for
read
me.
that in years. I haven't read that in years. I'm like, I don't want to leave because like it's so many Boston people there. I'm like, this is not even relatable to me anymore. But like, I want to respect like obviously this community, and I was a part of that community. But I'm like, I need to leave. But honestly, I hate group chats. If I'm being completely honest with you guys, group chats kill me, and especially it's the family group chats. Just venting really quick. Family group chats should not
But it's
exist.
community. Because just think
No,
about if you guys all got together for dinner, you kind of be hearing the same things and be a little annoyed too. But with your phone, you can put it on mute.
so with my family, we have longer group chats. So it's like with the extended, like half of my family is on this group chat. And so whenever there's a birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday, I'm like, I don't even know who you are. I have never met you in my life. You're not a part of my community. But
Dang, Jamar's family's gonna watch this and they're like, "Wow,
I'm just like, yo, we gotta stop. We gotta stop some group chats. Like group chats should be at a maximum 4 people, 5
No,
maybe. Like
no,
even y'all are too much for me. All right,
you're the one who created the group chat, bro."
I
right?
know, and I'm like, I regret it. I regret
And
it.
I have it on mute.
Exactly right. Because four's a crowd at that point. Five's a crowd.
Especially when you got people in the group chat with green text bubbles.
Oh,
Look
come
here.
on, dog.
This is what's breaking up community. This right here, capitalism is what's breaking up community, and capitalism is the reason why we are resorting to these digital spaces for community because there's less physical spaces to actually meet up in.
Well, actually, leaning in on that though, what I find interesting is really, I think Gen Z, the first generation that grew up in a truly digital, social media connected world. Um, the ramifications that their, you could call it a regression of like social communication and all of that, and not to mention that they, some of the more impactful times of their education and school experience was done during COVID, which further isolated them and distanced them. And like when you see sort of what's the shift that is happening out in, kind of like our industry, for example, like it's interesting when trying to do some work and do some like, urban planning and looking at sort of retail and understand appropriate uses. One of the things that was always a good sort of safe, hub or node of activity was like a brewery, a bar, those type of places where you can connect socially over, drinking and fast casual type of food. Well, I mean, Gen Z is actually drinking at a very um, reduced rate than any other generation in history. So much so that like the brewery industry is like suffering. Like bars and restaurants are suffering, where they could usually could consider alcohol consumption as like a major driver of income. It's actually changing those type of social gathering spaces. And I'm just wondering, in y'all's line of work, have you seen any other type of shift? For those who work in housing, has there been a sort of a shift of like amenity spaces that are no longer warranted or viable? Like, just has been some of the shift that y'all have been seeing in like the built world?
Yeah, I can't really speak towards the shift because I'm relatively new to the world of housing, especially affordable housing. That's a different market by itself. There's not as much space to have the kind of luxurious amenities. But I have seen in apartment buildings, because I'm still in an apartment, sadly, that when I was touring apartments, they're actually charging people now to rent so like community spaces. And so not only are developers and owners and all these other people making money off of the rent, they're also charging to just socialize itself, which is to me ridiculous. And maybe this is happening in Boston too, but like a couple of apartments I looked here in Baltimore, they were like, yeah, if you want to rent the space out to have like a gathering, it's like, a certain rate per hour. And when you remember when I had the Halloween party at our old building, it was free. You just had to say, hey, like I'm having this get together at whatever time, and we could meet. But now you have to pay. You have to pay to socialize sometimes, in a place that you already are paying to live in, which is ridiculous to me.
Yeah, my apartment building has always been paid to kind of rent out that space. Like, essentially, you pay so that other people in the building can't come in during your event, which I understand that. Versus just like, taking the time slacks, then people would do it all of the time. Um, but I would say because I think people bring up Gen Z a lot, and I like how my mom phrases this with different generations. She says, not the fault of the generation, but the fault of their parents. And so I think like what we're seeing with the shift in Gen Z, like with the less drinking, and just how the soft skills that they're lacking professionally, I think is the challenge that we should take on, because it's kind of holding up a mirror to us and like what culture we've built for ourselves. Like, why has our culture been to go out and connect over drinks? Why haven't we created a culture over other things? Because like drinking is not actually like very healthy to begin with. But also, why do we have students come into the profession as interns or emerging professionals, and we're not taking the time to teach them how to be a business professional? Like, we shouldn't ever make assumptions that every single person coming in has like learned how to communicate with others, learned how to draft an email. But that has been an assumption, and that has left a lot of people behind in the past. So I think if we kind of take it on as a challenge and look at it as like, let's just start from the baseline and bring everyone up to a certain standard, to me, that's more equitable than what we've been doing in the past.
Can you really blame our generation though, or is it the generation before us? Because I feel like we're just now getting. I mean, I guess it depends on when you start the millennial track, right? Like if you're saying the millennials are from the 1980s until like the late 1990s, like early 1980s to late 1990s, and yeah, we do have some responsibility there. But I really think it's the old heads, all right? It's the boomers and whatever generation that was after that, Gen whatever,
The
because they
parents.
have been in power for a long time, and they have been the ones that have curated these spaces for us. Granted, Zuckerberg is a millennial, right? So technically, that does fall on us, and we did partake in MySpace. We did build up these tech industries, but I don't know, when I'm looking at, some of the things like Netflix, right? Like there's no places for kids to go to watch movies, right? Like there's less movie theaters. How are kids going to be able to afford to drink in this world that we live in? Because there's no more teen jobs. Like you are starting to build wealth and accumulate wealth at a later stage in life now. So how can we expect kids to go out and have fun when there's no money to have fun?
Yeah,
There's no
but I
place
think
to have.
that's shifting the blame a little, because we all live in communities. We all have access to like public libraries, community centers. We all have a voice
Do
and
we?
can go
The
speak up
first
and
thing
say,
that
hey,
goes.
well, I'm just saying, like, movie theaters are closing. If you are that passionate about having a movie theater, speak up and go to your community meeting and fight to keep it.
But you can't
Not
afford to go to
everybody
the
has
movies.
that time, but You see what I'm saying? It's like that's shifting the blame because at the end of the day, it's still the parents' fault 'cause they're the ones sitting their kid in front of the TV and paying for Netflix rather than giving them a book or sending them to their friend's house or their cousin's house or saying, hey, just go sit outside. They'll figure it out. They're very creative if you give them the opportunity to be that. So that's what I'm saying. Like, that's shifting the blame because it's also like you're the end user paying for this. You don't have to.
Yeah, that's I mean that's good to say in certain parts of the country, but the reality is a lot of school systems, the first thing that goes are extracurriculars. The first thing that goes are the funding for libraries. First thing to go is the playgrounds. And so yeah, you can be creative, but when you are limited in the amount of spaces that you can go to in the first place, because people are like they don't think about the kids, they're only thinking about the adult
Well,
selves.
I'll actually push back on that because growing up, I didn't necessarily do a lot of extracurriculars in terms of school, and definitely not a lot of like extracurriculars through school. Yeah, I was in
That's
band.
the option, that's the thing.
Well, I mean, but I think what mostly I remember about like a lot of my childhood is like going outside and figuring out what to do. Like there, at one point there was a rule like you're not gonna keep running in and out my house. You come in, you stay in. So what did I have to do? I went out at like 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, and I had to figure out how to survive until 5 p.m. because I didn't want to stay in. And so like we would go and we would just like figure it out. And I think that what the digital age has done is actually reduced our kids' ability to be creative and to be bored. I think we undervalue the lessons you learn in like boredom. Like boredom is actually a skill that we should all lean into because it forces creativity. Like it forces you to create games. It forces you to, create new ways to connect and to learn and things of that nature. And I think that's one of the things that has been reduced with because when you play video games, you get online, like all the content is automatically fed to you, so you don't have to do no extra effort to entertain yourself because it's just being fed to you. You're just a consumer. You're not a creator. You're just a consumer.
Mm.
I think two things can be true. I think that what you're saying is right, right? Like the social media age has, even now, first thing I wake up in the morning, I'm swiping my phone, right? Like I'm not allowing myself to be bored because first thing I'm doing, I'm swiping. I'm laughing at some of this stuff. But I think there's also the fact that like that we didn't grow up in a time where we had bomb threats happening frequently at school. We didn't grow up in a time where mass shootings were happening all the time. So we had a little safer space. And again, I know there's different generations where there were drugs that were going on in major American cities in the 1980s and stuff like that. I completely understand that, but we're also growing up in a time where mass shootings happen on a daily basis at this point. And so you can't go to a club. You don't feel safe going to a club. There's just a mass shooting not too long ago in Austin. Like, it's just a different time. And so trying to compare our childhood where we had relatively safe streets for the most part, like we could go to school and not have to worry as much about a mass shooting. Our thoughts could allow us to be free and bored. But now children are being forced to grow up way too fast, partially because of social media, but because life is coming at them faster too.
But I also want to clarify too, because I, I don't want to say shifting the blame, but shifting the location. School should not replace home life. So, like, what we had at school is different than what my parents did at home. And every parent isn't the same. But again, I want to reinforce that it starts at home with the parents. So, I think if there was a more focus on how do you raise children and teaching people that could resolve some of the
I'm
issues.
gonna push back on that really quickly. And this is my last pushback, I promise. But the
Yeah.
reason why I'm pushing back is because things are more expensive now. And so the reason why there are less teen jobs is one because of technology, but also people are like who are grown adults can't afford to live on the basic necessities. The minimum wage has been stagnant for how long? And
Hmm.
so you have people raising kids, but their income doesn't go as far as it used to, even when we were growing up.
Hmm.
And so that's another reason why parents, I mean, I am quote unquote shifting the blame, but the reality is like the economy doesn't allow for families to parent because it's hard. It's hard for families to make ends meet in today's world. We
Hmm.
have gas growing up, gas prices going up. So I don't want to put all the blame on the parents, because the reality is they're reacting to the economy that generations have built, and questions that have been unsolved and not answered. Healthcare is going up. There's just so many things that are going on in this economy that, yes, we can shift the blame to other people because it's not their fault. They were just born into this, like you were saying with like Gen Z. They were born into this economy. They didn't want this.
So it leads me to also think about what are some of the social um, ways of communicating. What are some of the regressions that we're starting to see? And Jamar had actually brought up this point that I thought was a beautiful sort of comparison. And Whitney Perla, I don't know what the equivalent example is for young women, but like for guys, like the pickup culture, right? Of going to the basketball court and you going into a pickup game, right? Like there was that was like an arena for like communication and bonding and meeting new people and actually developing a community. Like there was a certain level of do's and don'ts that was like transcendent of like your of place and region that you grew up in. Like you go to a court and first thing you ask is who got next. And whoever got next, you walk up to them, you ask, you got five? If they got five, then you got next. But if they don't got five, you ask them, can I run with you? And there's that whole type of exchange. And like the what has replaced that is online gaming. Like my I have a young nephew where I was over at my sister's house and I hadn't seen him for a while and he came upstairs and I'm like, oh man, where you been at? I'm about hooping with my friends. Like, oh, I've never seen you come into the house. When'd you come in? Nah, I was in my room the whole time. And he was on 2K playing basketball, the same type of pickup basketball that we used to play growing up. He was doing that in a completely online space, but yet that same level of social navigation, communication, meeting new people, understanding how to work together as a team, lose and win, success and failure, like all of that is like removed because it's not the same type of connection point that it is when it's that physical arena.
Yeah, but I feel like we generalize a little too with the next generation, but I have cousins who are older than me and all they did was play video games, literally. So there are millennials who are as the same as the younger generations, not just the generations that are after us. And that comes to how like and this goes back to what Perla was saying about having safety and community. Some people feel safer at home and they feel safer interacting through a mic and their gaming controls versus going outside. Um, so I hear what you're saying, like that is a huge shift, but we also have to take into account, like specifically right now, the gentrification of those spaces, the basketball courts, they're turning into pickleball. Like that's not just the fault of like the kids not being able to go outside, because we know historically the basketball courts all haven't always been kept up. They haven't always been nice either. So that also affects how and when people can go to that space and play, and we know which neighborhoods those weren't kept up in and who they affect. Um, so I think culturally we need to figure out other things. Like it doesn't have to be just drinking, basketball, like standing on a court. Like there are other things that we can do. And I think that takes us like filtering out the noise and allowing ourselves to be bored and figuring out what those things are so that we can find connections and similarities with others.
Do you think it's hard to do that in today's world where like places like Starbucks are now like you have to pay to stay? And so, like the traditional meeting places that we would frequent, I mean, again, like I know you said the library and everything, but like, do you think it's harder because it feels like a lot of things that even as adults that we do, you have to pay to do it. Like, I mean, you can join a run club, but if you don't run like running, right, then you have to go to online, you have to go to your social media community to find these communities because that's where we all reside now. So I just feel like we're in this weird place where like you have to pay to do anything. You have to pay to watch a movie, which I mean, I guess that's traditional.
Mm,
But
uh,
uh, go ahead.
I, I, yes and no. I feel like if you want to do or find something, you will, and you'll do it at the economic level that you're currently at. Like you can use your phone and use the Meetup app to find any kind of passion or group to join and go meet those people in person. But again, I'm taking it back to the older Asian community that's in Chinatown Park. They just show up and they talk to each other. I'm not going to assume that they all know each other. It is so many people out there. So I think if you want to find a community, you can do that without having to pay any money.
And I think some of these spaces also weren't always third spaces. Like Starbucks didn't always exist. Like for my parents, they never went to Starbucks when they were younger. You know, you can meet up on the beach, in the woods, and in the park, like she was saying, and just chill with your friends. Like you don't necessarily need a curated space in order to have a third space.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously Starbucks hasn't always existed, but it has become more prevalent. It's taken over the mom and pop places that were people frequented back in the day, and so now we have a lot more of these commercialized spaces that are taking over, like the Tates, right? That's a big thing. That they have Tate down here in DC. I don't know where else they've expanded. But like there is the erosion of the local mom and pop, the arcades, the again traditional places that people used to meet up at. They have been eroding, and now you have to like really spend money to go to these places because they are more commercialized.
I would ask though, is that the millennial way of saying back in my day? Like,
It is. It
I used to
is.
walk to school.
It
Like,
is.
And that's the thing that like I think this episode is also trying to fight is that myth, right? The myth of like back in my day we did things better. Back in my day we did this. Why aren't kids doing this? I think we do have to like look at ourselves because every generation does it. My parents said, "Oh, back in my day we were outside all the time." I'm like, we were outside too, right? We just had the technology to also stay inside, but we were also outside. I had a bike. I rode for miles. I rode down to the local park to play basketball, pick up basketball for hours on end in the summer. Like we did the same things too. But like I said, we were never given that credit, and I think we're kind of doing the same thing with Gen Z and Gen Alpha.
I, I'm thinking, or I'm hearing everything that you guys are saying, and I'm just wondering if there's also a mindset change that happens with each generation. Like, I can't imagine a millennial's first thought. Sorry, not millennial. A Gen Z's first thought is, "Oh, let me go outside and hang out with my like." That's not going to be their reaction, right? And so I think there's a lot more at play when we're trying to resolve this social dilemma issue. And I do think, and I'm just thinking out loud, Whitney, you bring up a very good point about it starting at home, because the main people who have an influence on the new generation would be their parents or whoever's raising them. And if they could plant a seed that, hey, it's okay to socialize with people outside of this the screen here. It's okay to disagree with someone in person and not get angry. There's a level of emotional intelligence and just social intelligence that comes into play when you're able to go in a park and hang out with some stranger and play chess, right? So it does seem like a tangled web, but that baseline, level of fixing whatever it is that we're seeing here, I, I would have to agree it does start at home.
So,
And
so
like,
one, go ahead,
oh,
go ahead. William.
I was just gonna say, we can think of it in kind of like the context of headphones, because headphones have like changed over time, right? And like when we had, well, let's say our parents had headphones, they had the big headphones you put over your ears, and you still hear a certain amount of information outside of yourself if your volume isn't super high. Same with the wired headphones, but now we have noise canceling. And if all you do is slap a pair of headphones onto your child and they're watching TV on a phone or an iPad, they're not hearing how you're conversing with the world. They're not understanding any kind of social context at all. And then they grow up and you expect them to be able to talk to people, like that's completely unfair. So yeah, like it's how we're using the technology and being engaged with each other, and it takes effort. And I think that's part of the issue, is that everyone wants things to come easier, which is understandable. Life is hard, but like we have to put in effort in order for us to be able to communicate well.
You know what's funny about that? Especially when I'm at work, I will often put my headphones in and not listen to anything, just so nobody comes up to me and talks to me. I use it as a deterrent to have any type of communication. But I think what you're saying is actually true, because one of the things that I constantly struggle with as a new parent is that balance, right? Because for everything that Jamar said about, everything is more expensive, and this, that, and the third, there is a reality in which um, digital media helps to take your child's focus and attention span so that you can do other things as well. But then there is that balance that you want to have of still providing them with opportunities to play and to learn and to be bored and to be able to entertain themselves. I think that's the one thing that I'm trying to allow my son to do more, is to like be okay and be comfortable with playing by yourself. And I think that is kind of the hard balance in line to sort of walk. Um, but I think both of what you all are saying are actually truly valid, and it is a challenge and a struggle that I think our generation is going to have to try to navigate as we look to bring up those who follow us.
One last thing I want to say is that the reason, kind of like why this conversation kind of sparked, at least in my head, was because I had seen the Instagram reel where there were teens that were doing a teen takeover, and they live in a city where there's ample amounts of space to do whatever you want. It's New York City, right? Like there's parks, there's well kept up parks, there's not good parks, there's good public transportation, there's public plazas, there's mom and pop spots, there's traditional commercial spots. But they were yelling because whoever was recording, they were this one teen girl. She got in the video. She was like, we're bored," and these are the teens saying what they're bored, and that the teen takeover ended up being really destructive. But I'm also looking at the car meetups, right? Like all these things are seem very disruptive. I think it's Gen Z screaming for help and saying like we need more. But again, maybe that's just me reading
Mm,
between the lines. But
they want to be provided more because that's how they were raised.
Yeah,
They were
I,
handed everything. So now that they're not being handed anything, they don't know what to do with that
that
boredom.
that sounds like a millennial answer.
I
But
no, that's a understanding parenting. I'm not a parent, but I have
exactly, all
observed
four of
and
us up here
like
aren't parents.
not I've observed and I've listened to everything my mom has said. She's raised, I can say, two amazing children. That's a they were handed everything and they don't know what to do with that boredom now.
I truly do think that there is extreme value in being bored, and how and being able to sit in that boredom, and like that's where a lot of creativity truly does come from. And I mean, I struggle because I have so much access on my phone now. Like I can't. I struggle to sit in a waiting room and not pull out my phone and just sit there in my thoughts. And so I do think that is a a skill that has to sort of be recalibrated now that we have so much access to information. And like even for us, because we still have that access, we still have to recalibrate that skill. And I guess, as a closing sort of thought is, obviously we are in the industry where we shape spaces, we curate uh, experiences. Uh, what's y'all thought on just how this digital age that we live in, and the shifting social dynamics, what ramifications or lessons learned to be carried forward, like for folks in our industry, especially as we're looking to be sort of the next leaders to replace the boomers, the next leaders of the industry, pushing thought, pushing processes, and etc.
I feel like it's a tough question. Um, I would say, and this is going back to the brewery thing, is learning how to make micro spaces within a space so that everyone who's going to that, like say it's a brewery, they don't necessarily need to feel the urge to drink or to watch sports on the television. Like creating different pockets of spaces within that space can allow people to have different conversations, different activities. I think that would be really interesting to see.
Um, I would also even add, at the firm that Jamara and I used to work at in Boston, one of our PMs took us out every Friday to go out and sketch. And I think that level of effort, yes, I know you don't like the sketching, but that effort of leadership, of, I guess, cultivating spaces where people can talk whatever it is they want to talk, but also being that leader and physically bringing them outside and opening their eyes to things that they probably wouldn't have noticed if they were just behind a computer.
I noticed
Professionally
nothing.
speaking.
I
Yes,
noticed
you did,
nothing.
Jamar. You're in denial.
We
You're in
sketched.
denial. We
Yeah,
learned a
it was
lot.
terrible.
Okay,
Terrible.
well, conversation for another time. Okay, we can go down this path. But I do think if leaders actually invested more in their, I was going to say subordinates, but invested more in their employees, and really just made sure that they're good architects and not just a gear or a piece in their whole architecture machine, then I think that would go a long way.
I'm gonna piggyback off of that because we had a conversation at Be More Noma about like just the future of leadership, like with small firms. We was a small firm roundtable, and the interesting thing is that a lot of the owners of these firms did not see themselves passing down their firm to the next generation. And I think that's a slight. And I think kind of going back to what you guys have been, kind of the theme of this conversation, like really about the parents, but it's also about mentorship. And I think we are lacking a lot of mentorship in this field for younger architects. And I hope that changes. I hope we can be that change as we get older because now the reality is people are looking up to us. And so I think we have to be the change that we seek and we have to it starts with us.
Yeah, I'll just add my 2 cents. I think that Whitney, you really hit on something when you're talking about making micro spaces within spaces, and I think that along with that, we have to really make these spaces a little bit more dynamic and not static, and like have flexibility for change and evolution within a very short period of time. And I think that is thinking differently on like how retail is sized and spec'd, and how public space is sized and curated, and allowing for these spaces to be evolved as technology in the ways in which we connect rapidly evolves as well.
Mhm.
Um, so with that, we're going to go ahead and close it out. But this was a great discussion, and I think you all dropped some gems for sure. Until next time,
Whitney,
peace.
meet me by the flagpole.
Oh, we gonna talk.
Hey everybody! Thank you for listening to this episode of AutoBlack. If you have enjoyed the discussion, please hit that subscribe button or follow button, whatever you'd like. AutoBlack is a discussion-based podcast that is unapologetically Black at the intersection of design and culture. We acknowledge that our experiences are just that, our experience, but your voice is worth elevating and your perspective is valid. So please join the conversation and connect with us on Instagram at AutoBlack_podcast, or email us your thoughts, comments, and even future topics you'd like us to discuss on the stoop at AutoBlackPodcast@gmail.com. AutoBlack out. Bye!